How high and for how long? These two questions are high on people's mind worldwide as concerns over surging oil and consumer prices prevail. Fears of inflation these days are driven by the uprisings in the Middle East and North Africa, which for now show little signs of easing. Welcome to In Focus, and I'm your host, Shin Sang-hyup. And shortly, we will join by two experts for their insights into the current global economic woes. We will also discuss what countermeasures should be pursued, in particular by the South Korean government, to keep the country's economic growth on track. But first, here is a recap of what's happening in our newsreel.
From Tunisia to Libya to Oman, the list of countries in the Middle East and North Africa reeling from revolutions seems to be growing day by day. As political uncertainty sweeps across the regions which boast the world's biggest oil reserves, the rest of the world is gripped by economic anxiety. As a result, oil prices are hovering around $100 per barrel, the highest since the 2008 global financial meltdown. To prevent surging oil prices from derailing global financial stability, governments around the world are scrambling for solutions. South Korea, for one, which depends heavily on oil imports, held an emergency anti-inflation meeting this week and pledged to devise a contingency plan. Also, officials vowed to follow through with measures announced in January, including cutting import taxes on basic goods and freezing public fees. Meanwhile, South Korean consumers are feeling the pinch of rising energy and food prices. The country's consumer price index jumped 4.5% in February from a year earlier, hitting a 27-month high.
Welcome back. For a closer look at the global predicament of surging prices, we have two expert guests in the studio. To my right is Professor Lee Do-won, School of Economics at Yonsei University. Welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
Well, and to my left is the Professor Yu Ji-soo. He teaches at the College of Business Administration at Kookmin University. Thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you.
Well, the world is facing a challenge, that is the inflation, I think. The inflation is not a problem to a specific country. It became a global phenomenon. So I want to start today's discussion with this question. What are the major factors driving the latest inflationary pressure? Professor Lee, would you please?
Well, as we all know, the most important driving factor behind this inflation is the high oil price, which has been motivated by the unrest in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. But that's a more recent phenomenon. But before this high oil price, we had low materials and food prices soaring up in recent years. Mm-hmm. But this is more fundamental phenomenon. These soaring food price and low material prices were due to the high demand from emerging markets such as China and India. Mm-hmm. And that kind of phenomena is not going to go away in the near future. Mm-hmm.
Well, do you want to add something more about this?
Well, besides that, actually we have, Professor Lee mentioned two factors. One is political unrest in so-called MENA, Middle East and North Africa, and economic growth in emerging markets. If I want to add one more, it's the climate change.
Climate change,
because there's something going on in this, this Earth environment. For example, in Australia, there was a big torrential rain. It's an unprecedented, rain, which is virtually destroying all mines in Brisbane area. So that push up the price of iron ore, and also that affect, such climate change affecting a lot of agricultural, crop harvest. So that, I think, the reason why we see a lot of inflation pressure all over the, countries.
We have many factors. Well, that means that we have to make many efforts to find a solution.
Exactly.
To overcome this kind of crisis.
The thing is that all of these factors that we mentioned are external factors.
Yes.
But we do have some internal factors as well. As you know, in order to overcome the global financial crisis, the monetary policy of the Korean government has been very eased and loosened up during the last 3 years. So it means that we do have a lot of monetary expansion in our economy. And that is going to put another pressure on inflation.
Right. We will discuss about maybe interest-related issues later. But anyway, I would like to ask this question to Professor Yu. Do you think that the threat of accelerating inflation is very close to us? I mean, how real it is?
Well, I think it's depending on the commodities and food, whether it is food or manufactured goods. Manufactured goods, we don't see a lot of inflation yet because the companies try to observe the input cost because they're fearing they're driving away customers if they raise the price of goods and services they're providing. But overall, we see the inflation, and according to LG Research Institute, if the oil price goes up by 50%, then consumer price will go up about 2%. 1.92% to be exact. But we're talking about some, analysts reported that the oil price could go up $200, so which means 100% increase. Then we see that 4 or 5% of consumer price increase, which is a real threat to our economy.
I see. Do you have the same idea?
Yes, basically, I agree with this analysis. But what is really important is the effect of this high inflation on the real economy. Now, once we have this inflation, then it is very likely that it's going to cause the so-called chain reactions. Now, high inflation can motivate the labor side to demand higher wages. And this was the phenomena that was faced by many other emerging economies in the past. Now, then we can fall into this vicious trap of high inflation, high wage, and then high inflation again. And that is the phenomena that we really have to avoid.
Well, in the middle of such a crisis, actually, many governments are doing their best to overcome the crisis. The Korean government is not an exception. Well, actually, Korean government has announced or has taken a series of measures to overcome the crisis. I mean, inflation. So, how do you evaluate the efforts made by South Korean government? It was quite appropriate, Professor Lee?
Well, to my understanding, the government action so far have been very timid, or I should say cautious. And they even tried to, put some pressure on prices by administrative guidance. However, these measures should be strengthened from now on. More active measures can include currency appreciations, interest rate policies, probably some tax policies on energies and oils. But that we are going to see. I'm pretty sure that the Korean government have all of these policy options in their hands and will put them into action when the time is right.
So if I add one more question, if you don't mind. Say you just introduced about some policies which South Korean government should take, the interest rate policy and blah, blah, blah. If you recommend the one policy which South Korean government should take at first, what is it?
Well, that's a tricky question and very sensitive, politically speaking.
Yeah, right.
However, in order to point out one single most important policy, I think we need to look at the main cause of the inflation. And we already discussed that the main cause is the external factors such as high oil price and high food price. In order to deal with these external factors, I think the best way to deal with it is to exchange rate policies.
I see.
If we lower the exchange rate, if we allow our exchange rate to be lowered, then that is going to relieve some pressure from the import prices.
I see. I think we'll discuss about the policies, details of policies later. Professor Yu, could you add some more information?
Regarding this government policy, I just want to mention one episode. I met CEO who is in the food sector, and he complained a lot about this government policy because government put so much pressure on the food companies not to raise the price. And he said, if they don't raise the price now, it's going to be reflected later on, eventually. So in the second half of this year or next year, that food price will skyrocketing, which is not really good policy. If it comes down to price of food, let this market run the show, not the government. That the government, if they do artificially control the price, then somewhere along the line there will be a problem. It's a simmering problem. It's going to explode sometime later. And second policy, Professor Lee mentioned this macro policy of exchange rate. The one thing that I want to mention is that we should turn this threat into opportunities, like investing more in renewable energy. Because I'm pretty much sure that some companies are negatively affected by this inflation, but some companies actually can enjoy these opportunities. So if we invest more in renewable energies, then this Korea can be actually a technological leader in terms of this energy sector. Yeah.
Well, as you know very well, very recently there was some debate about whether the Bank of Korea, which is central bank in Korea, should increase its key interest rate or not. So do you think that interest rate policy can be a solution to overcome the challenges, facing the crisis?
I think interest rate policy is one option.
Yes.
And definitely it will be necessary to increase interest rate sometime in the future. But I'm not quite sure whether this is the right time to do it.
What do you mean?
The Bank of Korea is really in an awkward position to raise the interest rate right now. First of all, most of these high inflation are due to the external factors. And high interest rate affect domestic demands only. So that's not going to solve the problems such as high oil price or high food prices. So the effectiveness of the high interest rate is in questions. And another thing is that the side effect of high interest rate can be even larger than the benefits of high interest rate. The consumers are burdened with high household debt problems right now. Almost every classes of households in Korea are burdened with this household debt. And they are trying to pay the interest payment only right now. They are kinds of delaying the repayment of their principals. But in this point, if Bank of Korea increase the interest rate, that's going to put another burden on the household burden of paying the interest. And that's going to depress the domestic consumption as well. So when the effectiveness of the high interest rate is in questions, the side effect can be more serious.
Well, I want to discuss about the economic growth. Well, as you know very well, to achieve the economic growth, the economic stability seems to be this prerequisite. And then the global economy is right now recovering from the financial crisis in 2008. Korea is no exception. Actually, Korea has achieved the quite good the economic performance for the last several years. But because of risings in the Middle East and North Africa, I think the recovery trends will be hard hit. What do you think about it?
Well, there is conflicting reports from economists and analysts regarding why this happened and what kind of impact will be created by this crisis. Actually, there's Goldman Sachs coined the term BRICS, and then they coined the term again MENA, which is Middle East and North Africa. So MENA is supposed to be the growth engine next to BRICS, but it becomes actually a destroying engine for economic growth.
Yes.
So you don't know what will happen, but why it happened? Because a lot of conflicting reports and different views. Some people say it's not just the food or jobs; it's an aspiration for individual freedom.
Right.
Another view is that look at Egypt; it's the biggest importer of wheat,
Right.
and wheat price went up,
Yes.
and 3/4 of population of Egypt is the age of less than 30. Okay, very young people, and they don't have jobs. And also 30% of Egyptian people living less than $2 a day. So if the wheat price goes up, it means a starvation for them. So the economic crisis actually become political crisis.
I see.
So no matter what happened, even though the Libya government, situation becomes subside and stability kicks in, still I believe that this problem, poverty, remains there. Then I think that stability would not be in place. So that I observe that, predict that this, inflation pressure is coming from that MENA.
I see. Do you want something
Exactly. It seems like the MENA is no longer the engine of growth. It's actually the anchor that stopped the growth.
I see.
And the thing is that we really do not have many options to help this crisis from resolving. We just need to cross our finger and just expect that the crisis would not be contagious anymore. Having said that, this crisis is going to have definitely a negative impact on the economic growth of Korea as well. First of all, the export. If Korean government let the currency appreciate it, that is going to hit the export industry definitely. And also, it's the demand from the European countries. European countries, especially countries like Italy or Spain, they relied heavily on the import of oil from countries like Libya. If they are hit hard, then their demand for foreign import is going to be decreased, and that's going to dampen our export to the European countries as well. And interest rate again, if for some reason in the near future, Bank of Korea increased the interest rate to kill the inflation, that will dampen the domestic demand,
I see.
which will again be a negative impact on economic growth.
I like your expression, that engine, not engine, but
It's
anchor.
it's an anchor right now.
Yes, I think it's really...
I hope we can lift up the anchor pretty
Yes,
soon.
very interesting expression. Well, I want to talk about the business side, actually, because of the problems in the Middle East and North Africa, where the MNC's activities will hit directly. Depending on the sectors of industry, certainly there will be a degree of impact. But could you elaborate more about the impact, maybe, which the multinational corporations could get from the problems in those countries?
Well, oil prices, continue to rise for a long period of time. Then the shipbuilding industry will be the one to be hurt most, because shipbuilding is very much depend on the economic activities. The oil prices goes up, then demand will go down, the economic activity will shrink. Then shipbuilding, there is not much demand for ships. So shipbuilding industry will be the one be damaged, and the automobile as well. The oil price, gas price goes up, then people don't want to buy cars, and also logistics. Logistics companies like Hanjin Haeun, Daehanton, they are the ones who will be kind of victims. And airline is very much dependent on oil price, gas price. So gas price goes up, then profitability of airline is usually go down. So those are 4 sectors will be most hurt. Yeah.
Well, Professor Lee, please.
Well, maybe construction sector as well. I know that a lot of Korean construction companies are very active in the Middle East, and probably their long-term contract with these countries in crisis can be affected.
Yeah, I think, we hope that they can find a solution to overcome the difficulties facing right now, because their performance will be directly affect the Korean economic growth.
Well, if you look at the positive side of it, I'm trying to extract some positive aspect out of it. According to some political economists, they say that in the long run, democratic Middle East can be a great benefit to the global economy in the long run, if they can somehow, recover from this crisis. And then they can actually get into more prosperous and peaceful and democratic countries that can be really the second engine of growth.
I see. Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting point, too.
I think many analysts actually pointed out, unlike me, I'm very more pessimistic, but there are a lot of, optimistic people. For example, IMF predicted that the price will go up, oil price would be hovering around $110 and $120. But many analysts don't believe that, because that if Libyan situation stabilized, then actually the oil price will pull back.
Right,
So
right.
that is positive side. Again, as I mentioned, we can turn this threat into opportunities by investing more in renewable energy, like solar power, wind power. Then actually we can be a leader in new energy sector.
By the way, actually, I want to discuss more about the how we should deal with this the situation, because as we discussed before, we know what kind of difficulty problems we have, and we also discussed what are the solutions to overcome this kind of crisis. And then, generally speaking, people said that maybe the world is now better prepared to deal with this case. Korea is also said that we have well prepared, better prepared to deal with this crisis than when we did in the 2008. But when you look at the other side of the coin, actually there are some negative things happening. One of the representative things is the speculation in the oil and stock market. That means that we should curb this speculation to stabilize the global economy. What do you think about this issue?
Speculation on oil is not just a domestic problem, it's a global problem. And as you know, most of this speculation is driven by psychological factor. When they are uncertain about the future, they tend to speculate. So the first thing we need to do is to stabilize these psychological factors by carrying out proper policies that can actually calm the uncertainties of the futures. Right? I think that's all I can say.
Well, in the last G20 Seoul Summit, they mentioned about this, how we can create global mechanism to oversight systematically important financial institutions,
right.
SIFI. I think we have to add that to that, the framework that we should oversight, speculation as well, because financial institutions increase the speculation. That means they're more vulnerable to another, financial crisis. This world is so much linked, tightly linked, interlinked. So the one institution fall down, then actually it's a domino effect. So all institutions will go down. And so food price, oil price is also same effect. It's not just confined to this. We cannot leave it to one country. We have to have some kind of mechanism to oversight the prices and prevent the speculation, so that the price does not really affect all countries all over the world.
The average consumers want to protect themselves from inflation. So could you tell us what they do and what they do not? Okay, please, Professor Lee.
Well, unfortunately, the options that we have are very limited. But I think we really have to embrace the situation. We have to face the fact that most of this inflation came from outside Korea. However, if we can expect exchange rate appreciation and interest rate increase, then we have to be prepared for that. For example, when we faced exchange rate appreciation, the best thing to do is that to delay the sending of money to abroad. If you have to send money abroad, delay it and wait for the appreciation. And if you expect an interest rate increase, it's much better to pay off the debt as much as possible, as soon as possible, so that you can relieve the burden of interest payment in the future. And also be a smart consumers. These days, consumers can compare prices, such as gasoline prices, in the internet. And if you spend a little bit of your time, you can actually find cheaper places.
So being smart,
I hope so.
Consumers, right? How about you, Professor?
Well, many analysts now recommend to sell stocks, because the stocks is no longer plausible option under inflationary economy, and also rather buy commodities like a gold, not speculate, but invest in the commodities. So that's the personal investment in a strategy. But I think that coming down to energy saving, we should change our lifestyle, because we are not really conservation awareness people. We are spending too much energies, like carpool that policy or system should be developed and encouraged more by the government. They spend more money to encourage the people to share the car. Like in France, in Paris, they actually share the bicycles, and they also extend it to automobile sharing. So we have to adopt that kind of system to save the energy. And also, if you go to university, students are using the water like a free goods, which is not really good. It's actually reflected to their tuition eventually. So we should increase our awareness about this energy saving. I think a national campaign is needed now.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Lee and Professor Yu. Actually, we had quite a productive discussion about the challenging issue, which is the rising prices. And then, well, I hope to see you soon at the studio soon. Okay, thank you very much.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Price stability is more urgent than ever around the world, as uncertainty, in particular the Middle East and North Africa, pushes up prices. The global economic recovery is at stake. Every tool, therefore, must be utilized to create jobs and spur growth. I am Shin Sang-hyo for In Focus, and thank you for watching us. Please join us again, same time next week.